They say the most dangerous place in the world isn't a dark alley. It's a hospital bed when the people you love think you can't hear them. I'm Thelma Garza, a woman who lost everything in a single breath, only to realize that being dead to the world is the perfect way to watch it burn. The overhead lights were a surgical white, blinding and cold. Every breath was a battle, my body a roadmap of agony. Yet I clung to the warmth of Nigel's hand. "You've got this, Thelma," he whispered. I trusted that voice. I had trusted it for 5 years. Then the miracle turned into a nightmare. An amniotic fluid embolism. My organs were shutting down. With one final primal effort, a sharp cry pierced the room. Nigel choked back a sob. "It's a girl, Thelma. It's Maisie." Then the world went dark. Code blue. For 6 minutes, I was clinically dead. I was locked in. My brain was firing, but my muscles were frozen. "Time of death, 3:42 p.m., Dr. Walter said. "No, I'm alive. Look at me." Nigel's jagged sobs filled the room, followed by the cold, sharp voice of Margot. "Nigel, pull yourself together." The room cleared. The sobbing stopped. The silence that followed was a different kind of death. "Success," Margot whispered, her tone like acid. "This is the start of our true life. We finally have it all." Nigel's voice, once full of grief, was now sharp with guilt. "Mother, keep your voice down." "Who's going to hear us?" Margot countered. "We wait 30 days for brain death protocols, then we pull the plug. It's a mercy killing and the estate is ours." Then the scent of cloying perfume, the smell I'd found on Nigel's clothes for months. "Nigel, baby," a woman cooed. Bert, my assistant. I felt the air shift as she leaned over my corpse and kissed him. "Bert, not here," Nigel hissed. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she giggled, a mocking, cruel sound. "What about the baby?" Bert asked, stroking her own stomach. My assistant was carrying my husband's child, while my Maisie was alone in the nursery. "It's handled," Margot sighed. "A family in Europe wants a child of Maisie's pedigree. We'll tell the world she didn't make it. She's our ticket." They were going to sell my daughter. I hear you. I won't let it happen. Deep under the sheets, my pinky toe gave a microscopic, invisible twitch. Suddenly, a heavy weight jumped onto the bed, a low, vibrating whine. It was Prunella, my Rottweiler. I felt her cold nose press against my ankle, hidden by the blanket. She wasn't fooled by the monitors. She knew her alpha was still there. My journey for justice has just begun. The morning sun bled through the ICU curtains like a warning. I lay there, trapped in a body of cooling wax. The expensive scent of sandalwood preceded her. Margot. "She looks peaceful, doesn't she?" Her voice was chillingly light. "She looks dead, Mother," Nigel replied, the man who held my hand during labor while planning my funeral. "Miracles are expensive, Nigel," Margot tutted, "and unnecessary. I've already spoken to the board. We just need the formal declaration." A third set of footsteps entered, brisk, hurried. Bert, my husband's mistress, was standing at the foot of my bed, likely admiring my downfall. "The lawyer is here," she whispered, "but he needs a signature for the offshore assets." If Thelma has a legacy key, that biometric encryption her father set up, a signature won't work. We need her thumbprint while she's still viable. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were using my body to rob my child. I felt Bert's sharp fingers grab my wrist. "Nigel, hold her hand steady," she ordered. "I brought the portable scanner." "No, not like this. Fight, move, fight." I pictured lightning traveling from my brain to my fingertips. "Nigel, she's warm," Bert whispered, her voice shaking. "Just get the scan done," Nigel muttered. I felt the cold glass of the scanner press against my thumb. Now. My fingers curled, a slow, deliberate clenching of my fist. The device hit the floor with a plastic thud. "She moved," Bert gasped.
Nigel, her hand closed. It's a reflex, Bert. God, get a hold of yourself, Margot hissed. The brainstem is still functioning. Do it again. I can't, Bert whimpered. Suddenly, a thunderous woof shook the room. Prunella was on her feet, standing between them and my bed. Her upper lip curled, a low rumble in her chest like a freight train. Get that beast out of here, Margot shrieked. She won't let me near the bed, Nigel said, his voice tight with fear. Prunella's eyes were fixed on his throat. Fine, Margot growled. We'll bring a technician tomorrow. Let's go. As they left, Prunella rested her massive head on the mattress, her warm breath huffing against my arm. Good girl, Prunella. Keep them away. The scan failed. The clock is still ticking, and the ghost is starting to haunt back. The silence returned, heavy and sterile. But outside the door, the world was moving. Prunella hadn't moved an inch. She was a massive, breathing wall of muscle. It was day 3. For the first time, I wasn't just hearing my enemies. I was hearing the truth from the staff. Poor thing, a nurse whispered. Her husband, he hasn't even asked to see the babies today. He just sits in the cafeteria with that assistant. I wanted to scream. Nigel wasn't grieving. He was waiting for the clock to run out. But what the Garzas didn't know was that I wasn't alone. My best friend, the city's most ruthless defense attorney, Cassidy Thorne, had pinned a small silver brooch on my gown. It wasn't jewelry. It was a high-tech biometric recorder. Cassidy was in her office, listening to every whisper in this room. The door clicked open. The scent of expensive cigars and cold sweat. Nigel. He'd convinced the guards he needed a moment alone. "You're making this difficult, Thelma," he muttered, pacing. "The board is asking questions. They want to know why I can't access the legacy key. If you don't wake up, they're moving Maisie. I can't stop my mother. Just give me the thumbprint. Let me save the company." The door clicked again. "Bert, is it done? We have 5 minutes." "She's resisting," Nigel said. "I can't force her hand with that beast guarding her." "Then use the drops," Bert commanded. I heard a plastic bottle clink. A few drops in the IV and she'll be as limp as a rag. My heart rate spiked. They were going to drug me to steal my daughter's future. "Nigel, turn the monitor off," Bert hissed. "Margot already booked the flight for the buyers from London. They want to see the baby tomorrow." The buyers. They weren't just giving her away. They were selling her to settle the Garza family debts. I felt Nigel's hand move toward the IV line. I felt the plastic tube shake. No, not my daughter. The rage wasn't a spark anymore. It was a wildfire. Prunella sensed it, her bark a deafening explosion. Just as the first drop entered the line, I did it. I didn't just twitch. My hand flew up, my fingers locking around Nigel's wrist with the strength of a final prayer. My eyes snapped open, red-rimmed and burning with a lethal light. The ghost was gone. The executioner had arrived. The music in the intro explodes into a sharp, terrifying orchestral sting, violent and sudden. The sound of a heart monitor's alarm screaming in the background, and the panicked, choked gasp of a man being grabbed by a corpse fade into a heavy, electric silence.
The room went deathly silent, save for the frantic scream of the monitor I had just spiked. Nigel let out a strangled yelp, his face turning a sickly, ghostly white. He tried to pull away, but my fingers were like iron talons. Bert stumbled back against the crash cart, clutching her stomach. "Thelma!" Nigel breathed, his eyes wide with pure, unadulterated terror. You're... I couldn't speak yet. My throat felt like it was filled with jagged glass, but I looked him straight in the eye, my grip tightening until I heard his wrist bones groan. "I am back, and you are finished." "Nigel, do something!"
Bert hissed. "If the nurses see her like this, it's over." Nigel looked at the IV bag, then at the sedative drops. The man I loved was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. He began to pry my fingers off, one by one. I was weak, the adrenaline fading. As my hand fell back, Nigel turned to the IV line, his thumb poised over the injection port to silence me for good. Suddenly, the doors swung open. Prunella launched herself, a four-legged shadow of fury, pinning Nigel against the wall, her snapping jaws inches from his throat. Behind her stood Cassidy Thorne. She didn't look like a lawyer, she looked like an executioner. "Step away from the bed, Nigel," she said, her voice a low, lethal vibration. "Cassidy, thank God," Nigel lied. "She woke up. She's having a seizure. I was trying to help." "I said step back," Cassidy repeated. She held up her phone. The sensor in her brooch recorded everything. I heard about the drops. I heard about the buyers in London. Stunned silence. Nigel's face collapsed. The vial of sedative shattered on the tile. "It's not what you think," Nigel stammered. "Margot, she made the arrangements." "Save it for the police," Cassidy snapped. She turned to her guard. "Escort Mr. Garza and his assistant out. If they set foot on this floor again, consider them trespassers." Bert shrieked as they were dragged away. Cassidy rushed to my side, taking my hand. "I've got you, Thelma. The babies are safe. I moved them to a private wing an hour ago." I tried to form a word, a dry rasp. "Maisie." "She's safe," Cassidy promised. Her expression turned grim. "But we have to move fast. Margot doesn't know I'm here yet. We're moving you to my estate tonight. We're going to let the world continue to think you're in a coma. Let them plan your funeral."
The room was ringing with the aftermath. Nigel and Bert were being forced out, their protests fading into muffled shouts. I lay back, my lungs burning, my hand still cramped from clawing at Nigel's arm. "It's over, Thelma," Cassidy said, her voice shaking. "They're gone. The police are downstairs." I didn't answer. My eyes were fixed on the baby monitor. The screen was dark, a hollow rectangle of plastic. "Cassidy!" I rasped, pointing a tremoling finger. "The monitor!" She tapped the screen, frowning. Probably a signal drop. Then her face went a terrifying translucent white. She turned and ran, her heels echoing like frantic heartbeats. I couldn't run. I dragged myself out, the IV pole rattling like a skeleton. Every step was a serrated blade in my abdomen. I reached the nursery window just as Cassidy was coming out, her hands over her mouth. The bassinet was empty. No struggle, just a neatly folded blanket and a small printed card on the mattress. The paper trail. Cassidy grabbed the card, her knuckles white. "It's a legal discharge form," she whispered, "signed by the chief of medicine and the legal guardian on file." "I'm the guardian," I said, my voice cracking. "Not according to this," Cassidy said. At the bottom, in elegant, sharp cursive, was a signature that had haunted my marriage for years. Margot Garza. While Nigel and Bert played the villains in my room, drawing every guard and every bit of my attention, Margot had been in the administrator's office. She hadn't broken in. She walked in with lawyers and a forged court order. She didn't steal Maisie. She rescued her. "She's at the Garza estate," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "She's gone home to ground herself behind a wall of lawyers and private security," Cassidy added, her eyes flashing with fury. I looked at the empty crib. The scuffle in my room had been a distraction. This was a siege, and Margot had just taken the only hostage that mattered. Beside me, Prunella let out a low, mournful howl, her nose pressed against the empty bassinet. "Cassidy," I said, my voice turning cold, "call the car. I'm not staying in this bed another minute." The hospital room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Cassidy was on the phone, her voice a low hiss as she tore into her legal team. "How is that not kidnapping?" she snapped. She hung up and looked at me. They're calling it a temporary protective custody transfer, Thelma. Margot convinced a night shift judge she was the only stable guardian available. I sat on the edge of the bed, the hospital gown hanging off my shoulders. I was past crying. I was in a cold, analytical place I hadn't visited since my father died. She played them, I said. She probably even tipped off Nigel and Bert herself, because as long as they're in a cell and I'm unstable, Margot is the only Garza left standing. She wants the legacy keys, and she knows I won't give them to her as long as I have a choice. I reached for my laptop, hidden under the medical supplies. My fingers felt like ice, but they moved with precision. Margot's power comes from her reputation, the philanthropist, the pillar of society. I'm not hacking her bank accounts. I'm opening her vault. Every Garza secret my father ever tracked, the bribes to judges, the offshore accounts used to pay off the hospital board. I didn't send a mass leak. I sent a single encrypted file to Margot's private server, a mirror of her custody order, but with one addition, a digital watermark linking it directly to a money laundering trail. I just gave her a choice, I told Cassidy, hitting send. She can keep the baby and wake up to an FBI raid on every Garza property, or she can realize she made a mistake and bring Maisie back to the neutral ground of the hospital annex. You're blackmailing her, Cassidy whispered. No, I said. I'm negotiating. 20 seconds later, my phone buzzed. A text from an unlisted number. The annex, 30 minutes. Come alone. Beside me, Prunella let out a sharp, expectant bark. She was ready, and so was I. The rain was blurring the world outside, but my vision had never been clearer. I wasn't just a mother going to get her child. I was a ghost returning to reclaim the throne Margot thought she'd inherited. Let the rain wash away the blood. The audit of the Garza soul begins now. And let's look at Prunella. She's officially the tactical reinforcement. While Margot was busy building a legal fortress, Prunella was busy reminding Thelma that even the most powerful grandmother in the city can't hide from the truth when it's backed by a four-legged shadow. She knows that come alone is just a suggestion when you have a Rottweiler as a shadow. If you're ready to see Thelma walk into that annex and face the woman who tried to sell her soul, hit that like button. The file is sent, the meeting is set. I'll see you in the next chapter. Prunella, eyes open.
The world outside the armored glass was a blur of gray, but inside, the air was thick with tension. I sat in the SUV, my arms trembling, not from the cold, but from the phantom weight of the daughter I didn't have yet. Prunella sat on the floorboards, her massive head on my knee. She knew we were close. The annex is neutral ground, but it's still Garza territory, Cassidy whispered. I have my team at every exit. If Margot tries a stunt, we lock it down. We pulled into the sterile underground lot. At the far end, a silver sedan sat idling. The door opened. Margot stepped out in charcoal cashmere. In her arms was a small, white bundle. I swung the door wide, the damp air hitting my face like a slap. I walked toward her, steps slow but deliberate. My abdomen screamed, but I didn't let my breath hitch. You're a fast learner, Thelma, Margot said, her voice echoing. Blackmail is a desperate move. It's beneath the Garza name. The Garza name is being dragged through the mud by your son, I countered. Give me my daughter. Margot looked down at Maisie. She has the family eyes. If you go live with those files, you ruin her inheritance too. I'd rather she grow up with nothing than grow up with you, I said, my voice like ice. Margot's eyes flashed with genuine hatred. She stepped forward and handed the bundle to me. The moment Maisie's weight hit my chest, the world stopped spinning. She was warm. She was breathing. This isn't over, Margot whispered, leaning close. You have the baby, but I have the board. You're still mentally unstable in the eyes of the law. I'll see you in court. You won't, I replied, tucking the blanket tighter. Because if you file another motion, the world finds out exactly what happened to your husband's accidental overdose 10 years ago. Margot froze. The color didn't just leave her face, it evaporated. I didn't wait for her to recover. I turned my back, walked to the SUV, and climbed inside. As Cassidy peeled away, I looked back. Margot was still standing in the middle of the garage, a small gray figure swallowed by the shadows. I have her, Cassidy. I actually have her. And now, Cassidy said, meeting my eyes in the mirror, we go to ground. The world outside the armored glass was a blur of gray and rain. But inside the car, the air was thick with the scent of milk and baby powder. It was the only thing keeping me grounded. I sat in the back of Cassidy's SUV, my arms trembling as I held her. Maisie. For days I had been a ghost, a vegetable, a legacy, a problem to be solved. But as Maisie shifted in her sleep, her tiny hand brushing against my collarbone, I felt the truth. I wasn't a ghost. I was a mother. "She's perfect, Thelma," Cassidy whispered. "She looks exactly like you." I looked down at her. To Margot, she was a ticket to liquidating debt. To Nigel, she was a burden to be drugged into silence. But to me, she was the reason my heart started beating again after 6 minutes of silence. I pressed my forehead against hers, a slow, deep inhale. Every breath she took was a victory over the people who tried to sell her. "I have her, Cassidy," I whispered. My voice was finally steady. "I actually have her." "And you're never letting go again," Cassidy replied. We pulled into the hidden estate, the gates closing with a final echoing thud. No beeping monitors, no sterile hospital smell. Prunella hopped out first, her tail giving a single authoritative wag as she scouted the perimeter. She waited at the front door, the final line of defense. I carried Maisie into the nursery Cassidy had prepared, filled with soft light and warm blankets. As I tucked her in, the pain from my surgery flared, a sharp, biting reminder of what I had survived. I didn't reach for a pill. I just watched her eyes flutter open for a brief second. "You are safe now," I whispered. "They think I am gone, but as long as I have breath, no one is ever touching you again." I stayed there for a long time. The fear was still there, a cold shadow in the corner, but it was being crowded out. A mother's love isn't just soft, it's a weapon. I looked at the baby monitor on the nightstand. It wasn't dark anymore, it was clear. I could see every breath she took, and I knew that the next time I left this room, I wouldn't be a victim, I would be the storm. The sanctuary was just the staging ground. The Garza Empire was built on my silence, but it's going to burn in the sound of my name.
The news was everywhere. Tragedy at the Garza Empire. Socialite Thelma Garza passes after miracle birth. I sat in the dark of Cassidy's study, watching the live feed. Nigel was on the screen, dabbing at his eyes with a silk handkerchief. He looked perfect, the grieving widower, the broken hero who had lost his world. "The funeral starts in 2 hours, Cassidy said, leaning against the doorframe with a black garment bag. "The guest list is a who's who of the people you blackmailed, the judge, the board. They're all there to pay respects to a woman they think is silenced." I didn't look away. "He's using my death to consolidate the stock, isn't he?" "Exactly," Cassidy replied. "Margot has orchestrated a vote immediately following the service. They're naming Nigel permanent chairman in your honor. It's a clean sweep. Unless—" I stood up. The pain in my side was a dull hum compared to the fire in my chest. I looked at the dress, midnight velvet, the color of a bruise. "The biometric link is active," I said, checking my phone. "If I step onto that stage, the files I sent Margot go live on every screen in the cathedral, every tablet, every news camera."
Cassidy's eyes shone with fear and pride. "You're detonating a bomb in the middle of their sanctuary," she whispered. "I wanted a ghost," I said. "I'm going to give them one they'll never forget." We took a nondescript black sedan, sliding through the city like a shadow. As we pulled up to the rear entrance, I could hear the organ music, a somber, weeping melody Nigel had picked to make the donors cry. I stepped out, the cool air hitting my face. I pulled the black veil over my eyes. Cassidy caught my arm. "Once you walk through those doors, there's no going back. You'll be the most famous woman in the country." I looked at the massive stone walls of the cathedral. Prunella sat by my side, her eyes alert, her weight a comforting presence against my leg. She wouldn't be coming inside, but she had done her job. She had kept me alive long enough to reach this door. "Good," I said, my voice cold and steady. "I want them to see me coming." The funeral was supposed to be for me, but the only thing being buried today is the Garza legacy.
The sound of a heavy oak door groaning open is followed by the singular rhythmic clack, clack, clack of heels on cold marble, echoing with the weight of a heartbeat. I walked toward the side door, my heels clicking softly. Inside, I could hear Nigel's voice rising in a practiced, shaky vibrato. "Thelma was my light," he cried, "and though she is gone, her legacy lives on." I pushed the door open. "Your light didn't go out, Nigel. It just moved to the shadows." The cathedral was a sea of black lace and expensive grief. The air was thick with the scent of lilies, the smell of a death that hadn't happened. At the altar, Nigel stood behind a mahogany podium. He looked broken. He looked perfect. "She was my soul," he choked out. "I know Thelma would want us to move forward, to protect the empire she loved." I stepped into the center aisle. A single sharp heel click cut through his speech like a gunshot. I pushed the black veil back from my face, my eyes locked on the back of his head. "You always were a terrible liar, Nigel." The silence that followed was deafening. Nigel froze. He rotated toward the aisle, the blood draining from his face so fast I thought he might faint. "Thelma!" he gasped. The microphone broadcasted his terror to every donor, every board member, and every news camera. "You look like you've seen a ghost," I said, my voice calm and echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "But as you can see, I'm very much alive, and I've come to collect my things." Margot stood up, a mask of fury. "This is an outrage! Security, remove her!" "Wait," I said, holding up my phone. A digital chime echoed. Suddenly, the massive LED screens behind the altar vanished. In their place, the forged custody order, then the recording. "Just get the scan done! Margot already booked the flight for the buyers!" The gasp from the congregation was like a wave crashing. The board of directors stood up. The camera swiveled. "You were selling our daughter, Nigel," I said, walking to the foot of the altar. "To pay off the debts you hid from me. You were going to pull the plug on my life for a chairmanship you never earned." Nigel looked at the screens, the crowd, then me. He was trapped. "Thelma, please," he stammered. "Don't," I snapped. "The police are waiting. You didn't just lose the company today, Nigel." I leaned in, my voice a whisper only he could hear. "You lost everything, and I'm just getting started." I turned my back. I didn't wait for the handcuffs or the shouting. I walked back down the aisle, through the sea of stunned faces, and out into the blinding light. Cassidy was waiting at the car. "Is it done?" she asked. I looked at the phone. Target neutralized. "No," I said. "Now we go home to Maisie, and then we build something they can never touch." The dust from the cathedral hadn't even settled before the real war began. While the media looped my resurrection, I was back at the estate, the iron gates locked. Adrenaline was ebbing, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. I sat in the nursery, the only light a warm lamp. Prunella was stretched across the doorway, her ears twitching at every creak. "The frozen assets hit the news," Cassidy said, walking in with coffee. "Nigel and Bert are held without bail, but Margot, she vanished before the police reached the front pew." I took a sip, the heat grounding me. "She didn't vanish, Cassidy. She repositioned. She still has the offshore keys my father didn't know about, and she's desperate." Suddenly, Prunella stood up, a low, vibrating growl starting in her chest. Her eyes were fixed on the hallway. I reached for the tablet, pulling up the perimeter cameras. The rain blurred the feed. I toggled to the kitchen. The guard was slumped against the doorframe, unconscious. "Cassidy, get the baby," I whispered. The power didn't just flicker, it died. The house was plunged into a thick, suffocating darkness. The backup generators stayed silent. "Thelma, the nursery door won't lock," Cassidy hissed. "It's an electronic strike plate. It defaults to open when the power is cut." I stood up, feeling for the heavy brass fire poker. I didn't need a light to know where the enemy was. I could hear the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of high heels on the hardwood downstairs. Margot wasn't coming with an army, she was coming personally. "Stay behind the crib," I told Cassidy. I stepped into the hallway, my hand on Prunella's collar. The dog was a statue of coiled muscle. We waited in the shadows at the top of the stairs. "I know you're up there, Thelma," Margot's voice floated up from the foyer, chillingly calm. "A nice touch, crashing your own funeral, but you forgot one thing about this family." A beam of a high-powered flashlight cut through the dark, hitting the portraits of the Garza ancestors. "We don't lose," Margot said, "and we certainly don't let ghosts dictate our future." The siege has moved inside the walls, and this time there is no one left to call but the darkness itself. The darkness felt like a physical weight, broken only by the rhythmic, taunting sweep of Margot's flashlight. Prunella didn't growl anymore. I could feel the heat radiating from her fur, a silent promise of violence. "You're making this so difficult, Thelma," Margot's voice floated up. "If you had just stayed dead, I could have kept the name intact. Now I have to burn the whole thing down." I gripped the cold brass fire poker, adrenaline bridging the searing pain in my side. "You already burned it, Margot," I shouted. "The moment you tried to sell my daughter, you lost the right to the name. You're a predator." The flashlight beam snapped toward the stairs, catching me in its blinding glare. "And you," Margot hissed, her heels starting to climb, "are an inconvenience." I saw the glint of metal in her hand, a snub-nosed revolver. She wasn't here to talk. She was here for a tragic relapse. "Now, Prunella," I commanded. The Rottweiler didn't hesitate. She launched. 100 pounds of muscle vanished into the dark. A sharp gasp, a heavy thud, and the flashlight clattered down the marble, casting strobe-like flashes across the walls. "Get off me!" Margot shrieked. Then the deafening crack of a gunshot. My heart stopped. "Prunella!" But the dog hadn't fallen. I heard a muffled yelp, then the sound of tearing fabric and heavy breathing. I lunged forward, ignoring the pain, and grabbed the spinning light. I shined it down the stairs. Prunella had Margot pinned against the landing. The revolver was sliding toward the edge. Margot's expensive cashmere was shredded, her face a mask of pure terror as she stared into the eyes of a dog that didn't care about her bank account. "Call her off!" Margot screamed. "Thelma, call her off!" I stood at the top, looking down at the woman who tried to erase me. I could have looked away. "Stay, Prunella," I said. The dog froze, jaws inches from Margot's throat. "You thought the most dangerous place was a hospital bed," I said, walking down until I was looking her in the eye. "You were wrong. It's in the way of a mother and her dog."
I picked up the revolver, flicking the safety with a practiced click. The police are 3 minutes away, Margot, and this time there isn't a judge in the world who can save you. The matriarch has fallen. The alpha has returned.
The police sirens weren't a distant hum anymore. They were a blue and red strobe light reflecting off the rain-slicked windows. Margot sat on the cold marble floor, her breathing shallow, her eyes darting toward the revolver in my hand. "You think this is a victory?" she spat, her voice regaining its jagged edge. "The Garza estate is built on layers of debt. Without me, the banks will seize this house by morning." "Let them," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I'd rather live in a tent with my daughter than in a palace built on her sale." The front doors burst open. A tactical team swarmed in, boots thundering on the hardwood. Behind them, Cassidy came running down the stairs, clutching Maisie. The baby was crying, a thin, sharp sound that cut through the chaos. I watched as the officers hauled Margot to her feet. They didn't treat her like a socialite. They treated her like a fugitive. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Margot turned her head. "You'll fail, Thelma. You're too much heart, not enough steel." "My father died protecting his integrity," I replied. "You're going to die in a cell protecting a lie." The power flickered back on, bathing the wreckage in a warm, mocking glow. I took Maisie from Cassidy's arms, and the trembling in my hands finally stopped. "The offshore accounts," Cassidy whispered, checking her tablet. "They're moving. Someone is trying to drain the legacy keys from a remote location." I looked at the feed, a black sedan idling at the servant's gate. "Bert," I whispered. My assistant, my shadow for 3 years, hadn't just been Nigel's mistress. She was the one who managed my father's digital archives. She didn't want the name. She wanted the liquid gold hidden behind the encryption. "She's not going to the police station," I said. "She's going to the airport." I looked at Prunella. Her ear was notched from the bullet, blood matting her fur, but her eyes were bright. "Prunella, let's go," I said. We didn't wait for the police. I grabbed the keys to the SUV. If Bert thought she could slip away into the night with my family's future, she had forgotten one thing. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was the hunter. The matriarch was in chains, but the thief was still running. And in this house, the only thing we do to thieves is track them down. Let the engine roar. The final audit is about to go mobile. The electronic rhythm swells into a powerful driving chase theme, urgent and aggressive, the sound of an SUV engine turning over with a ferocious growl, and the sharp, focused huff of a dog ready for the final pursuit fade into a tense, cinematic silence.
The rain was a blinding deluge as I pushed the SUV through the service gates. My side burned with every turn, but the sight of the black sedan's taillights acted like a shot of adrenaline. Bert wasn't just an assistant. She was the architect of the digital shadows my father built. She knew where the bodies were buried because she was the one who digitized the maps. Prunella sat in the passenger seat, her massive chest heaving, her eyes fixed on the road. She didn't bark. She knew this was the final stretch. "You're not getting away, Bert," I whispered. The sedan swerved toward the private airfield. Bert was counting on the Garza name to clear her path, unaware that the name was now a lead weight dragging her down. As we screeched onto the tarmac, I saw the small Gulfstream idling, its turbines whining in the storm. Bert was out of the car, a silver briefcase handcuffed to her wrist. She looked frantic. I slammed on the brakes, the SUV skidding to a halt. I stepped out into the rain, the wind whipping my hair. Prunella was out before I was, a silent blur of black and tan charging across the wet asphalt. "It's over, Bert," I shouted over the roar of the engines. She spun around, pulling a high-tech device from her pocket, the master legacy key. "You should have stayed in the hospital, Thelma. This was never about Nigel or Margot. It was about the data." "The data belongs to my daughter," I countered. "In 60 seconds, the accounts will be empty, and the server will wipe. You'll be a beggar." She aimed the device at the plane's receiver. "Prunella, take it." The dog didn't go for the throat, she went for the arm. With a leap that defied her size, Prunella intercepted Bert's wrist. A sickening crunch and the device flew from her hand, skidding across the tarmac. Bert collapsed to her knees, screaming, as Prunella stood over her, a growl vibrating through the ground. I dived for the device. The screen was counting down. 5, 4, 3. I pressed my thumb to the sensor. My biometric signature, the one they tried to steal while I was dead, flashed green. Transfer canceled. System locked. The jet's engines cycled down as police cruisers screamed onto the airfield. I stood up, soaked to the bone. You're right about one thing, Bert. I am sentimental, and that's exactly why you lost. The audit is closed, the thief is grounded, and the legacy is finally home.
The roar of the jet engines faded into a haunting whistle. Bert sat slumped, a mask of broken ambition as the police swarmed. They didn't see a high-tech thief. They saw a woman whose greed had run out of road. I stood there, the master legacy key cold and heavy in my palm. My father's secrets, the Garza fortune, they were all back in my hand. Prunella trotted back to my side, her notched ear twitching. She sat heavily against my leg. "We're going home, girl," I whispered. 1 month later, the world looked very different. The Garza estate was no longer a fortress. I had sold the palace of lies and moved to a sun-drenched cottage by the coast. The media had moved on, leaving me with the one thing I fought for: peace. I sat on the porch, the salt air tangling in my hair. Inside, the melodic gurgle of Maisie in her swing. To her, the world was just warmth, milk, and the giant protective shadow of a Rottweiler who never left her side. Cassidy walked out, dropping a stack of documents. "It's official," she said. "Nigel and Bert accepted the plea. 15 years each. Margot is fighting, but her lawyers are quitting." I didn't feel a surge of triumph, just hollow relief. "The Garza empire is liquidated," Cassidy added, "but the trust for Maisie is secure. You gave her a clean slate." I looked at the ocean. My father thought power was the ultimate protection. He was wrong. Power was just a target. "I don't want her to have a name," I said. "I want her to have a life." Prunella let out a soft huff, watching a butterfly drift past the porch. I walked inside. Maisie was awake, her big, curious eyes tracking me. I picked her up, feeling the steady, miraculous beat of her heart. For 6 minutes, I had been dead. For 30 days, I had been a ghost. But as I looked at my daughter, I realized the truth. The most dangerous place in the world wasn't a hospital bed or a dark alley. It was anywhere my enemies thought I had nothing left to lose. I kissed Maisie's forehead and looked at the sunset. The storm was over. The ghost had finally come home. The ledger is balanced. The guardian is at rest. And the only legacy that matters is breathing in my arms.